Do you agree with what you found? Which communication style did you most come out like? The globe, the arrow, the number one, or the computer? Now that you know more about yourself, it'll help us learn more on how to speak to others. And we'll go into that as we continue with the program. Now that we've learned about our communication style, let's start talking about our cultural view. Now we're going to begin by taking a cultural view self-examination like we did with the communication style. For each of the 5 statements, rank the answers for each question in order you prefer. In other words, you see the first statement, I like, and you'll notice that there are 6 different options right there. You want to rank those options 1 through 6. 1 meaning that's the one you most agree with or you most like, and then 2 would be a little bit less, all the way down to 6, which is the one that you least agree with or least like. There can only be 1 through 6 under each statement, and there's 7 different statements. So for question number 1, what it would look like is spend lots of time with my family. You may have a number 1 there. Thinking about how everything is connected and to everything else. You may have a number 2 there. Helping people to agree on things so everybody can be happy. You may have a number 3 there. And all the way to number 6. And again, for each statement, like the statement here, number 1 is I like, you will have 1 through 6. 1 is the one that you're most like or you most agree with, and 6 will be the one you least like or least agree with. Complete the self-examination, and then once you're done, restart the program. Again, do not worry about grading the program or scoring the program. We'll do that a little bit later as we go through CSP, our Communication Success Program. Now that you've had the self-exam, let's talk a little bit deeper about what the cultural view actually is. Now there's going to be a lot of information here, and this is kind of information that's going to give you insight if you really think about it, but it's also the kind you're going to have to practice as you go through this. So don't expect yourself to get everything the first time. Remember at the beginning of the program I told you you were going to have multiple exposures? Well, this is part of the reason because in the Communication Success Program there really is a lot of information. It's vital information, but it does take practice. Cultural views is based on a methodology originally developed by Dr. Clare Graves, who was a professor at Union College. And his work was carried on by Dr. Don Beck and Chris Cohen. And they actually have a book called Spiral Dynamics, Mastering Values, Leadership, and Change. I don't want to bog you down with unnecessary information, because even though that methodology and research is a large, huge body of information, for what we're doing today with communication success, we don't need it all. We just need to focus on some of it. So here's what we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on the cultural views that people hold. The research shows that we're all a product of where we were born, when we were born, and the culture we grew up in. Now understand that when I say culture, it is not racial or regional or national. Culture is this house may have a different culture than the very next door neighbor, and often does. Now there are 8 different cultural views. You can actually look at those as cultural framework, and the information in it is how we see our world. Because we all have our own version of reality, a little bit different from somebody else. And I'll go into that a little further. It tells you a little bit about the cultural views and about the beliefs. Now there's a reason there's a picture of Eskimos on the bottom of that page. If you went up to an Eskimo who had never been outside of his or her area, so they'd never been introduced to the modern civilization, and the only experience they had is living on the tundra and hunting seals and different animals and making their clothes out of that and living in igloos. What would it be like if you started to talk about that person about life in Miami? You started telling them how in Miami you have all these big roads and tall buildings and how it's 100 degrees outside and it's sunshiny and people walked around in flip-flops and shorts and bikinis, and there was a beach and people would swim and lay in the warm sand. I think you get my point. This person, this Eskimo, would they even have an idea at all of what you were talking about? And the truth is, no. It's not in their experience, so they wouldn't be able to relate to what you were talking about. They have never experienced it. They have never seen it. So when you were describing a beach of glistening white sand, they wouldn't understand. When you were describing people walking around in bikinis that barely covered their parts, in other words, parts of their body, they wouldn't understand because, of course, an Eskimo, as you can see in the picture, they have to stay dressed all the time for self-preservation. When you see 2 frames and you see different information in those frames, our cultural views are basically like cultural frames. We have a frame, and within that frame is the information we see as our world. what we believe our world consists of, what we believe exists in our world. Now, you've probably seen people that believe things that you just don't believe, and vice versa. You believe things they don't believe. A lot of that is because either they're in a different framework or cultural view, or their particular framework may be the same as yours, but it has different content. Now, we'll go a little bit deeper into that, so don't let it worry you at the moment. Okay? We'll go into each one of them. Now, I told you a little bit earlier in the program that there are 8 cultural views that research shows that we all live through, operate through. And we have, of course, we have a dominant cultural view, a dominant framework of how we see the world. For Communication Success Program, we're going to be dealing with 6 of the 8. Now, I will briefly cover the other 2, but you'll find out in everyday communication, in work, you're generally not going to run into the other 2 a lot. And I'll explain more as we go. Now, there are 6 ones that we are going to focus on, which are their people, I take what I want, responsible, dutiful, the good life, is everybody happy? Or should I say, is everybody happy? And knowledge is power. Those are the titles, or those are the 6 cultural views that we're going to talk about mainly for CSP. If you look in your workbook, you'll see the first cultural view. This is one of the 2 that we're not going to spend a lot of time on. I survive, the first cultural view, is a cultural view where people are very centered on survival. It is a cultural view where people really don't, all they can think about is survival at the most basic level. Food, water, sustenance. They have a very low self-awareness, and they're driven by their senses and instinct, and they satisfy physiological needs for food, water, and reproduction. So that they're at a pretty basic cognitive state. You'll notice also in the middle of the page, it says they can be seen in. You can see this cultural view in the first peoples. If you look at our history in the first peoples, cavemen. Does it sound like cavemen would be in this cultural view, that they would be focused on sustenance, in other words, eating and not being eaten? Yes. Also in newborn infants, when we were born, we're an infant. Really, if you think about it, this is about all we can focus on, is staying clean and having food to eat. Senile elderly. Elderly, a lot of time when they have Alzheimer and different debilitating conditions, we actually go back, or we go to a I survived cultural view. That's all we can really focus on. And a lot of times when people have severe stress or shock, it can also send them backward along the cultural views. And when I say send them backward, you can only focus on what you can cognitively understand at the time. And so that's what's happening with the I survived. Now, most people that you deal with in your work, unless you're in a nursing home or someplace specific like that, will not be in the I survive cultural view. And that's why I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. The next cultural view, and this cultural view is referred to as their people. It's their people because people in this cultural view are very centered around their people, or who they consider their people. If you look at it, this cultural view is we are safe. This cultural view is about belongingness to the group. So it has powerful chieftains. Now this cultural view also has obeying spirits, has guardian angels, believes in voodoo. Not everybody in this cultural view will believe in voodoo now. Remember, in each cultural view, you have a framework, and then you have content based on where you were born, when you were born, and the culture you were exposed to as you grew up, your experiences. So, powerful chieftains, obeys spirits, or spirit beings, mystical signs, sacred objects, events, memories, tribal customs, rites of passage, lives in magical village, seeks harmony with nature's power. Now, what does all that mean? Well, you'll see to the right a picture of an American Indian. This cultural view is about belonging to the group. You can see this cultural view in corporations. You can see it in different groups. Your people, in other words, their people, could be a community. It could be a church organization. It could be a tribal type organization because it has a tribal type structure. It's always going to be about their people. The difference in the framework is just this. Who does this person in this cultural view consider their people? In their world, their people will consist of the group that they feel that connection with. They will have a chieftain. They will believe in certain traditions. They will believe in doing things for their people. People in this cultural view need rituals. When they make changes through rituals. They have to find reassurance by expressing a sense of enchantment in life's mysteries. People in their people are basically married to the group. They do everything for the group. They follow the directions of the chieftain. For change, they need ceremony. They need ritual. They need the traditions. They need their symbols. On the Bible, you see some places where we see this particular cultural view. Informing tribes, magic, art, spirits, guardian angels, voodoo curses, blood oaths, family rituals, mystical ethnic beliefs, strong third world settings, gangs, athletic teams, corporate tribes. So as you can see, this particular cultural view, their people, is all around us. It is a large part of the population of the world that share this particular framework, if you will. Now remember, someone who's in their people in one region may have different content than someone who's in their people in another region, but they will have the same general framework. And that's how we use the information in Communication Success Program. As we go through it, we'll talk about it and get a better understanding. But basically, here's how you would recognize a person like that. A person like that will always talk about their people, pleasing the group, being part of the group, doing what the group expects so they can remain a part of the group. The worst thing you could do to someone in this particular cultural view is to ostracize them or kick them out of the group. To this person, that would be the ultimate punishment. Of course, when I say the group, it has to be their group. Examples that we've lived with all of our lives. Well, if you think of Walt Disney, Disney's full of what? Magic, wonder, fairies, and elves. Those are all part of the their people worldview. It consists of magic. As a matter of fact, there are people in our world, of course, who do believe in spirits and fairies and elves. And guess what worldview or cultural view they see? They operate through their people. Again, remember that the content can be different depending on your particular, where you were born, when you were born, and the particular culture, the information, the experiences you have that you grew up in. The next cultural view that we've all seen and still see today is I take what I want. Now, people in this particular cultural view, they look at everything in the haves and the have-nots. It's a world full of threats and predators. They are hedonistic in that they want to please themselves. That's really their main concern. They don't have any constraints. Now, they're spontaneous. They don't have guilt. Where in the other cultural views, people feel bad because they don't meet expectations or it's against their particular religion or different motivators of that nature. When you're in the I take what I want cultural view, there is no guilt because you just take what you want. So you don't feel bad about how you get it. It's all about getting it. They're spontaneous, of course. You have people like conquerors, people who can outfox, dominate. They're aggressive. They're hedonistic. They like that immediate sensory satisfaction. Power, impulses, displays. In other words, they have to show that they're the toughest. They're the biggest. They're the most powerful. Problems originate outside of self. They don't do anything wrong. If there's an issue, it was created externally, not internally. In other words, they're just acting on what they want, so there's nothing wrong with that. Challenge death and win. They will look death in the eye and they will challenge it because, again, it's about what they want. Now, people in I take what I want cultural view, you have people like gang leaders, warlords. If you look at the picture on page, I take what I want, you're looking at Alexander the Great. He was in this particular cultural view. I take what I want. He wanted to rule the world, and he pretty much did rule most of the known world as far as known back then. Now, you can see this in Survival of the Fittest, guilt-free. Respect and reputation matter more than the life itself. One of the things that's interesting about this is we all go through this particular cultural view in our teenage years, or most of us do. This is where we get a little self-centered. This is where we were really focused on what we want. This is where we drive our parents crazy and they wonder what's wrong with us. This is what it is. We're in the I take what I want cultural view. What that means is when you come up to us and you say something to us and you exert your authority as a parent, the person in this worldview or cultural view does not recognize your authority because this person does not acquiesce to authority or does not respond well to authority. This person responds well to power. Okay? In other words, you've got to have enough power to have the right to be able to tell them anything. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to get violent, of course. It just means you have to have the power. And we'll talk more about this worldview. This worldview, of course, they try to avoid shame. Remember, they don't feel guilty, but they can feel shame. Shame in that they did not reach their goal. They like to succeed or die. Now, another place you can see this worldview, Christopher Columbus. If you think about Christopher, explorers, people who are willing to jump out there, Lewis and Clark, people who are willing to say, I don't care what the risks are, I'm going to try to make this happen because I want to accomplish this. That is the I take what I want worldview. You've probably picked up by now that in all worldviews, there are good traits and there are bad traits. You could even look at it as there are unhealthy beliefs and there are healthy beliefs. This worldview is no exception. While your gang leaders would be holding unhealthy beliefs, then your explorers would have healthy beliefs. Of course, depending on how far they take those beliefs and what they're willing to do, they can become unhealthy. I guess it goes back to the old adage, too much of anything can be a bad thing, right? It's all about me in this worldview. They're assertive, creative, but they're a bit predatory. They do not learn from punishment because it was not their fault. Now, how many people do you think go through our penal systems in this particular cultural view and they don't get rehabilitated because in their cultural view, there was nothing wrong with what they did? I'm sure a lot of us, if we're leaders, or even in different situations, or if you have teenagers, you've experienced the I take what I want cultural view. And sometimes it can be frustrating, but when you learn to communicate through it, you can become very powerful and successful with it. I often do communication success program for organizations and also for public workshops. And when I hold these workshops, this particular worldview is one of them that is the most confusing for people. The confusion usually stems from having to remember that there are positive and negative, or healthy and unhealthy traits in all of the cultural or worldviews. Usually when I'm giving the workshops for CSP in organizations and in public, I get a lot of questions on this particular worldview. But as we talk about the other worldviews, a lot of this one will sort of flesh out, or if you will, become clear for you. Be respectful, dutiful. Respectful, dutiful is a worldview where people with this cultural framework believe that they have the one truth or the one right way to do whatever it is they do. They know the secret. People in this particular cultural view, they seek order from chaos, truth or righteousness path. In other words, how do I walk that path, or here's how I walk that path in order to get my reward. They believe in sacrifice today so you can have your reward tomorrow. They believe in serving the higher purpose or higher cause or higher being, depending on the content of that cultural framework. They find purpose in causes. Take, for instance, the Crusades or jihads. They have a code of conduct. Now, this particular worldview is guilt-based. They do have a very, very defined sense of right and wrong. Understand that sense of right and wrong will be different based on the content of this particular framework. They sacrifice today for tomorrow. It's sacrificing self. They believe in absolute principles, and righteous living guarantees future reward. Impulse control through guilt and laws, regulations, discipline, morals. This person expects to be punished when they break the rules. To go a little bit further with that, if there's no punishment, it must not have been a rule. This person's all about the one right way, the one truth. Now, we've all met people who really ardently believe that they have the one truth, the one right way. Again, this particular cultural view. You'll notice they believe they have the right way, but you'll also have probably noticed, as you've met people throughout your life and through life experience, not everybody who sees the world through that framework, through that cultural view, has the same content or believes the same truth. They have a version of the truth they believe that they know everybody should listen to, should follow, but it's not always the same. You look at that in different religions, you can see that. In different philosophies. When you look at those things, each religion believes that they have the one truth that everybody should adhere to, follow, and follow their rules and guidelines. So the question is that the one truth? Of course, we're not going to get into that discussion. The point being, the people in this particular cultural view do believe that theirs is that one truth. Where do we see this cultural view? We see it a lot in literature, monotheism. You see it in Puritan America or Charles Dickens' England. In A Christmas Carol, you see it in fundamentalism in any form, any ism. You see it in patriotism, transcendence causes. This is what the military is based on. Duty, honor, authority, a clearly defined hierarchy. People who are in this particular cultural view will believe in a clearly defined hierarchy. They will understand where their place is in that, and they understand that they are to stay in their place. This is a very, very defined cultural view. It is reinforced through appeals to tradition, fair treatment, of course, fair treatment for all, by honoring length of service and loyalty. Change needs to be attached and focused through a new cause. When you want someone in this particular cultural view to change, that change needs to be attached to a cause. So that cause has to be based on that right way of doing things, or that one truth. It has to fit into that structure. And of course, when you come up with that change, that new strategy, it will have to be set in stone. It will have to be the new, this is the one right way to do things. This is the way we're going to do it. Our next cultural view is the good life. Of course, that one just sounds good, doesn't it? You'll also notice it's I improve. Success-driven research for best answers to ways to advance. Goal-oriented planning and strategies to do better. Affirms we can change. In other words, people in this particular cultural view, they believe they can change the world and mold it to a good world now so they can enjoy it. They can enjoy life. They can enjoy the things they have. They're materialistic. They're competitive. They focus on competition. They believe that change is inherent in everything. Progress by learning and seeking knowledge. Manipulating Earth's resources to live the good life. Optimistic, risk-taking, self-reliant. Deserve success. People in this cultural view believe that if you'll work hard, you'll learn, you'll add more skills, you actually can succeed. In other words, your success will be in direct proportion into your effort. This worldview, you can see it in individualism, economics, mobility, our government, the Enlightenment, progress, Wall Street, Rodeo Drive, all the shops, and of course shopping and material things, Wall Street, all the money, success, competition, rise of the middle class. This worldview is all about changing the world to make it a better place now. Of course, our modern industrial society is based in this worldview. Technology, materialism, success, competition. People in this cultural view or this worldview believe in success through effort. And so if you're not willing to give effort, then people in this cultural view don't really think you should have any success. It's based on your effort. When it comes to change, people in this cultural view will say, okay, how is this getting us ahead? Does it get us ahead? The structure is going to be delicate, but people in this particular cultural view are very autonomous. They're very individual, and it's about personal achievement or individual achievement. You can see this worldview exercised by displaying symbols of success or recognition for achievement, challenges for improvement, that big giant Mercedes, maybe that yacht. This worldview is materialistic and individualistic and competitive. If you look at the picture, you see a few things. You see, of course, someone in the medical field, the airplane. People in this cultural view believe in technology and what it can provide for the good life. We see our next cultural view is everybody happy? Now, you'll notice as we go through these cultural views that there's quite a bit difference in the way they focus on the world. Not only the information within the framework, but how the framework focuses on the world. Where the last one was all about competition and individualism, is everybody happy is consensus focused. It wants consensus. It seeks spirituality. It is egalitarian and humanitarian. They want everybody to have a say-so, everybody to get along. There's tolerance and acceptance of a range of differences. In other words, let people be people. Explore the inner self and inner selves. Be freed from greed and dogma. Have feelings and sensitivity to other people. In other words, go out of your way to make people feel good and happy. Spread that cheer. They want to spread the resources and opportunities equally. They want everybody to be treated fair, to get along, to be happy, to have consensus. They want it to be a world full of harmony and enriching human development. Now you see this in the human rights movement, social responsibility, a group over the individual. In other words, they believe in teams over individualism. In direct contrast to our last one, the good life, right? When I say last one, the last cultural view. They search for inner peace and tranquility. They don't have that competitive drive and strive like the good life. Doctors Without Borders, the ACLU, interpersonal sensitivity, harmony. Change is based on humanitarian. What's it doing for people? Is it taking care of the world and the people? Are we feeling better about it? Does it help us all? Or is it treating us fairly? All of that is in this worldview. This worldview is all about people and fairness and kindness and consideration. So they're really, if you think about this worldview, is everybody happy? It's quite a bit different than all the previous or all the ones we've talked about up to this point, the cultural views. Our next cultural view is I learn. Knowledge is king. People who share this particular cultural view, they take big picture views of living systems. They look at themselves as a part of a much larger organism. They believe in integrative structures and evolutionary flows. In other words, they see the connection between man and all the other animals on the planet and the trees and the forest. They understand that they are part of a much larger organism, and of course, what they do has a profound effect on the larger organism. They have a need to design. They like to look at natural habitats that support the overall organism, if you will. Human emergence through steps and stages. This person in this cultural view does not respect titles or authority. They respect knowledge. It's not that they're disrespectful. It's that their focus on is knowledge. So whatever your title happens to be, whether it's a police officer or a professor or whether you're the CEO of IBM, someone in this particular cultural view will not care. What they'll care is how much knowledge you have and what you're willing to do with it. Knowledge supersedes rank, power, or status. It's all about natural flows, flexibility, spontaneity, functionality. They believe in the magnificence of existence. Now, you see this in Peter Senge, which is he's a leadership and organizational development expert, has been around, written several books. And in his organizations that he talks about, where everybody is a smaller part of the organization but working with the bigger picture in mind, is where you see this type thing or this type of cultural view. Stephen Hawking's Brief History of Time, Chaos Theory, Appropriate Technology. People in the knowledge is king perspective or cultural view do not use the same standards as the other cultural views for success, for contributions, for focus, where the other cultural views will focus on their particular framework, in other words, their people or their one right way or what they want, or people should be treated well, or success and competition. This particular cultural view believes in taking care of the entire organism. They actually look at how it affects the larger whole of everything they do. Now, this particular cultural view is still a little centered on themselves, and still it's egocentric. It's not ethnocentric. It's centered on them and not us as in people. It's everything as in the organism. That's the focus of this particular cultural view. They have a much more dynamic, or not necessarily more dynamic, but it encompasses a lot more than the cultural framework of the other cultural views. They see everything as flexible, integrative, knowledge-based. The world is information-rich and highly mobile. They live in a global village where other worldviews live in little particular areas with particular people. This person that holds this cultural view believes in a global village. All cultural views are actually present and necessary to having this particular cultural view. They recognize the validity of all of them, and they have all of them within their global village. They believe that people enjoy doing things that fit, in other words, who they are naturally. So when you're able to do what you do naturally, what you like, what you're good at, you'll contribute much better to the global village or to the whole. The work must be meaningful to the overall health of life, the individual's life, working for the whole. In Knowledge is Power, people seek to find natural ways of living that focuses their energy. They believe in looking through the complexity and the diversity and doing what's best for the whole. So I guess I've probably said the whole now 50 times, but the reason I give such emphasis to that is because this cultural view is a big change from the other cultural views as far as the depth of its focus. It's broadened tremendously in this particular cultural view. Now, this is the last of the 6 that we're going to see in the workplace and the ones that we're going to discuss in Communication Success Program. But we are going to look at the final cultural view, which is we are the network. Now, this particular cultural view, it's a lot like the previous, which is Knowledge is Power. However, this one is more into the network. It's a mesh of functionality. They believe in connections of every body, of all people. It's the synergy of all life forms, the focus. They are much more focused on the group of the whole, the different functionality, the different pieces of the whole, not in the whole as a global village. It's more planetary concerns, rank above any kind of narrow group interest. They will always look at the big picture. It's a reordered world for them of new meaning and good for all. It's a collective mind collective in solving the issues of the whole. In other words, they believe in focusing on those issues. It's self-distinct as a part of the larger whole. Everyone is connected to everything else. It's holistic. It's intuitive. It's cooperative. This is the newest of the cultural views when you look at the research. And there's not really that much known about it right now. So we will not run into people who use this cultural view or who see the world through this cultural view a whole lot at the moment. More information will be, of course, coming forth as research is done and as more we learn about different ways that we see cultures or we see our world as the information's added, as the framework changes. But this particular one we won't see a whole lot. So we're going to stop with the previous worldview as far as CSP with knowledge is power, because that worldview is prominent and we will run into it. If you look at the worldviews, research shows that the worldviews are not only individual, of course, and you've probably figured this out by now, but there are whole regions that are in a particular worldview or a cultural view. In the United States itself, the largest cultural view is the cultural view respectful, dutiful. But only slightly behind it is the good life. And then following the good life is their people. And then following their people would be, is everybody happy? So these worldviews are around us, and they're changing. People come and go. People's views change as people's experiences change, as people's means change. What you want to understand out of this for CSP is when you can actually understand how someone sees the world and how they believe their world is. The first thing it will do for you is allow you to understand why they do what they do and why they say what they say. We as people, we tend to think things personally when we don't understand it. We tend to say, oh, well, that was a personal attack. Well, when you start to really understand these traits and characteristics of these different cultural views, you realize a lot of the things you see that you thought were personal, it has nothing to do with you at all. It's based on the way they see their world, their cultural view. The next thing it'll do for you, well, what would it do for you if you could actually understand that how someone sees the world, their beliefs, their information, and you started attaching your goals to their beliefs, their goals, well, how they see the world? Do you think that would add any power to your communication, your ability to overcome the communications barriers or the communications disconnect, the communication styles and the cultural views? What would it do for you if you were able to do that? Recognize the belief system they actually operated through or their cultural view. Well, if you think about it, there's a lot of things you can do, and each one of them are good as far as interpersonal communication. Again, when I do these seminars, both public and private for organizations and in public, I have a lot of questions about the different cultural views people hold. It takes a little while to actually play with the information and to give yourself exposure to the information for you to really start to understand. Now, the one question that you always have to know to determine what cultural view a person is operating through is why. Why do they believe what they believe? When you identify a belief that they hold, you have to find out why they believe it. And that's going to tell you how they see their world or which cultural view they're in. And we'll talk more about that. Now, before we go any further, let's go back and let's score our self-examination and then count the number of ones. In other words, the color with the most number of ones, the color with the most number of twos, and the color with the most number of threes. Then write that in your workbook. Once you've done that, whichever color is the greatest is, of course, your particular cultural view, the one that you operate through most dominantly. Now, you'll be a mixture of different ones, but you'll have a dominant one, and that's the one we're looking for. If you have two that tie, go back to the pages that talk about those cultural views. Look at the different traits and characteristics, and think about which one you actually believe more of. And you'll be able to determine which one of those cultural views really resonate with you more, which one that you operate through. You're going to see what is your communication style and what is your cultural view. And of course, those come from our two self-examinations. Go ahead and take a second and write in your cultural view and your communication style.